I had the wonderful opportunity of interviewing Daryl Wilson of Wilson Audio at Rocky Mountain Audio Fest this year. In the interview, we talk about Daryl and his new speaker, the Chronosonic XVX, as well as his apprenticeship with his father, Dave Wilson. I even got to interview his mother and co-founder of Wilson Audio, Sheryl Lee Wilson. Sheryl and I shared a touching moment when talking about our loved ones who no longer are with us. This is the story of Wilson Audio. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Cynthia, the Audio Belle, and I am here with Daryl Wilson of Wilson Audio. Hi, Daryl. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for taking the time to come talk with me.
Thank you for taking the time to do this interview with me. So, Daryl, your mom and dad founded Wilson Audio, and your dad was a huge icon in high-end audio. He still is. And some of the things I think about Teal Audio and how when Jim Teal passed away, the designer took a completely different turn with the company. So as you've taken over Wilson Audio, are you aware that the audiophile world is watching you?
I don't think of it in terms of that. I think that it's somewhat of a tragedy what happened with Teal, where within 5 years, my understanding is there were 5 CEOs that went in and out of the doors of the company. From a craftsman perspective, people that have families that are building the products, I would be concerned about that instability. And my whole life, I've seen my parents make decisions around the dinner table, struggle about hard moves for the company and what they should be doing, and moving from one state to the other, and the hardships that happened there. At one point, losing their house. And so I think about it from a human perspective. I've worked with a lot of the guys in the back, a lot of the craftsmen, and I know them personally. We joke together. I've eaten dinner at their houses. We've hung out after hours and whatnot. So the stability for Wilson Audio, for me, is more than just a business decision. Mm-hmm. That's part of it, and we have a world-class team that help make the decision. And I think any leader surrounds himself with very competent and capable people that have honed their craft, and my dad did that. He surrounded himself by really the best craftsmen, whether it's John in marketing or Trent in sales, Tyler, who I'm sure that you've spoken with back and forth. He's doing our social outreach, and he's doing a fantastic job. All of our supervisors in the fab shop, Jed or Joe Bills or Clint, all these guys, they love what they do. They take pride in what they do, and it's meaningful. And for me to see a time where Wilson Audio has to lay people off, I want to make decisions that prevent that in the future. So in making business decisions, whether it's shoring up a business emergency fund or product development, and strategically looking at what products really need to be refreshed, or what is the market asking for, and what's going to be the best approach for Wilson Audio, I think about it in those terms.
Well, from what I've seen, you've been doing a really good job of taking up what your father has passed on as far as tradition goes. So I heard that you started out as an apprentice with your father. Is that right?
Well, geez, back in the days, it was all about earning money to go play video games, eat pizza, and gummy worms. You know, it was very simplistic. It was helping mom and dad do what they were doing, and looking at it from a child's perspective, it's part of the family. It's family business, and so the way that they taught me is through example. My mom and dad, they were always equally yoked as they moved the company forward. The business decisions were always made together. My dad was really the creative mind behind it, and the visionary behind how he hears the sound. How do you get that sound? How do you develop something and design something that extracts that kind of information out of the recording, right? And then flip side of that coin is my mom, who has the business savvy and is dealing with the banks and is moving the company from California to Utah and working out how to build the building and the home and securing all that in a weekend. I mean, and that's the Sheryl clone is what we call her. So having them together, really, it's the best of both worlds, and it really has been amazing to see how far the company was able to go with them being equally yoked. That's the kind of example that I saw in the house. I got my degree in international business. It started off in the arts, and so when I look at design, I look at it from a very artistic, canvas-based approach, where, you know, if I were painting this, what would the brush strokes be? So I think that's a little bit different than my dad.
This speaker here, I heard that this was your design fully, the Chronosonic XVX.
Yes. It takes a team, really. I identify what speakers, what drivers to use. I identify really the design parameters. The goal was, let's have this thing be 6'4", as tall as me, right? Had to be shorter than the Wham, and over to my right there's a Wham, and we'll probably show that later. But it had to be able to fit into more rooms. And then I outline what the performance has to be. And then we as a team talk strategically about how do we get better damping, how do we address the enclosure volumes for each one, how do we mechanically move these things back and forth in an analog fashion so we get time alignment accuracy that really matches the Wham into such a small package, relatively speaking. So without Blake sending me where the drivers need to be and with rough boxes, my canvas to start sketching, that's the first step, and he's a part of that. As I iterate different elements on the product and during the development cycle, it's Jerem, it's Vern with drivers, it's the whole team. And if we're not in sync with one another, and if we don't understand and have a common vision for true, authentic excellence in all things, then you're not able to complete this as quickly. It was about 2 years in development, very intensely during this last year. Right after DAW was launched, I was heavy in the conceptual design and moving this one forward, because my dad and I and the team, we all talked about this one for a long time. The XLF right now is 7 years old, and we've learned a lot. We've developed a lot in the last 7 years, and so how do we take all that stuff and put it into XVX? So
it is all about teamwork, and I've met your mom, and she's a lovely woman.
She is.
I can see the love that your parents put into this company. I could see it through your mom, just through being around her and talking to her this brief time that I've spoken with her. You know, I could read about it online, but when I met her in person, it was something else. I could tell that your parents must have had such a synergy.
Yeah. It's the way that they approach life and the way that they approach things that last, stuff that works. These are all phrases that we hear in our house. Things that truly matter in the long run. That applies also in business. And she's an amazing woman.
So in which aspects would you say that you carry on your father's traditions, and which aspects would you say you've made your own?
It's a really good question.
Because I see that we have a speaker over here that I'm just going to kind of rotate my camera around real quick to show the audience.
I'm making your editing more difficult. I apologize.
Well, it's more down to earth that way. I think it's more real. I really enjoy the real approach. So, what speaker is this? This is.
So here we've got the Wham Master Chronosonic. My father worked on this design for a little over 5 years. It went through a lot of different phases, and in its approach and its execution, he knew what it needed to do from a mechanical perspective and how the drivers needed to align in the time domain at a level that's never been done before. The approach to doing that shifted with time and based off of construction methodology and what our capabilities are at Wilson Audio. That's where some of the team effort came in, where he'd have drawings and say, hey, I want it this way. And we'd say, well, okay, what's the core? Really, what does it need to do? And then we talk about the core fundamental of its purpose, so that design purpose. And then we say, okay, based off of our machinery and our craftsmanship and our expertise, we can still accomplish that if we change it in this way. And then we would massage that, and he would draw more, and it would go. But the whole team understood that this was his magnum opus, that this was a beautiful bookend to his life, where he started off as a recording engineer and he tinkered with hi-fi, as a kid, but really consumed from a product that was successful and recognized in the world. The Wham really was that first chapter in the book. And then the Master Chronosonic is the last chapter. So,
well, I've seen the pictures of your vintage Wham products that your dad and mom started, and I've seen where we are today, and it's crazy the transformation, how it looked back then as opposed to now. But I will say that when I was looking at photos of your speakers online, and particularly this one, I thought, man, this looks kind of like a giant robot. And then I saw it in person, and this is my first time seeing one in person, and it was intimidating because it's so large. But then I see this one over here that you created as well. It looks really amazing. But this one, at the same token, over here, I'm going to change back to your Chronosonic XVX, which was your design, or your team's design. This one, it looks really artistic. And I have to say, this one looking so artistic as compared to this one, there's a big difference in the aesthetics as well.
Yeah, the sculpture elements of the Wham Master Chronosonic, my dad wanted to sculpt two core elements into it. He wanted to sculpt hope and aspiration. Hope, when he was going to Brigham Young University, the place he met my mom, he had a botany professor, Professor Moore, that talked about seeds, and for some reason this stuck with my dad, where the seed is its most fragile when moisture hits it, when it cracks open and that root goes out looking for an external source of nutrition. You get the first blade of grass that comes up, or blade that comes up, and then when that second blade comes up, it starts with the photosynthesis process, and it's found an external source of nutrition. Now it's harvesting energy from an external source, two external sources, and its chance of survival goes up alone. And so on the side here, you see one blade, and then you see the second blade. So hope, aspiration. Was when he was a kid, he traveled around the United States with his family. Old car, no air conditioning, plastic seats, his dad smoked, miserable. He talked a lot about how uncomfortable it was, but he loved pulling in to the Richfield Oil Company gas stations. And their logo was a large eagle with its wings raised up. And the profile on the side is like two wings. And the thoughts of a child, right? He thought, how high would that eagle soar if it just dropped its wings, right? It would just go upwards. So hope and aspiration were two elements, especially in the latter part of his life, that he really clung onto, and he wanted his sculpture to inspire. So when you ask, our approaches, at different times in his life, he sculpted differently. And so the way that I designed the XVX versus the way my dad designed the Wham, they're just fundamentally different in our approaches. So it's really hard to answer that question. For the XVX, the WAM in some installations has been too tall. And so customers that have wanted it, that can afford it, they just can't install it in their room because it's too tall.
How tall is it?
It's 84 inches tall.
Wow.
Right. And so I've been to Asia several times, and there's not a room that I've walked in that I can't walk in. So 6'4" to me was a good benchmark to set as a design objective for the team. And then the price. How can we take a large portion of the performance of the WAM Master Chronosonic and take everything that we learned there and put it into a smaller package? So, same woofers. We developed a new mid-range. It's an Alnico bass driver that is so sweet and beautiful in the lower mid-range. The upper mid-range is managed by this variant of the 4-inch that's in the WAM. And so we have a lot of experience with how this 4-inch blends with a 7-inch. The same Convergence Energy Mark V, as in the WAM, is in the front firing and the rear firing tweeter for the XVX. So taking technologies just from a driver perspective, putting it in here, it was pretty straight across. The Alnico mid-range was one of the last projects my dad and Vern and I worked on together. And we got it to a point where there was only a little bit of refinement after my dad passed. Mm-hmm. And it works so beautifully in this configuration. So my approach to the aesthetics of this is, in Utah is very inspiring to me. Just the salt flats and the expansiveness. Music feels that way. Music should emotionally stir you in a way that when you look at these gorgeous sceneries in Utah, that visually that kind of impact has. And so you'll notice Utah has lots of arches, and so you'll notice arches, delicate arch up here. You'll notice canyonlands and other things that kind of hint to some of the beautiful things, I think,
so
in
you
Utah.
see places in your design.
Yeah, and waves. I see waves coming up the side. When I was in Amsterdam, just a few months ago. No, when was it? When was I in Amsterdam? It was the end of the year.
Right after Munich.
Right after, May. So in May. So how about we cut? So, when I was after we went to the Munich show, went to Amsterdam with my wife, and we went to the Concertgebouw, and some of these sweeping lines remind me of, as you're sitting in the Concertgebouw, just how the sound, it rolls up. And I'd never been in the Concertgebouw before this trip, and so I was impressed with how tall the ceilings are, compared to like the Musikverein or the Staatsoper or Bravenel Hall or the Temple Square, some of the spaces at Temple Square in Salt Lake City. So when I was listening to music there, just how the sound seemed to just roll up and over, and how expansive it was for the space. Linking visually what Utah does for me emotionally, what music should be doing, I try to design expansive themes. XVX is a petroglyph for me. From an artist perspective, I look at XVX and I think about how music has the ability to really pull us back in time, pull us to special moments in our time. You're still sitting in the same place that you were before you closed your eyes, but intellectually you actually go somewhere else. The V is like an arrow pointing down, and so music for so many people have the ability to ground you in the moment, almost like a Zen philosophy, no thing, in the moment, you're just feeling what is. And then the other X is almost like looking toward the future. What are the possibilities of the future in music? Once again, for so many people, you hear music and it's inspiring. You want to be better. You want to do better. You want to do different things. It motivates you to action. So XVX for me is almost like past, present, future, what music should do emotionally for the listener. So once again, design and the way that I approach this product just is fundamentally different than the way my dad approached the WAM Master Chronosonic.
Well, I think
and I have
that's
nothing
beautiful.
but respect and supporting him. Gosh, you're gonna get a lot of tears on this one. Supporting him through that process was really, truly an honor.
Wow. Both are really beautiful, and just your story of how you came up with the design for it and what inspired you, different places and the way the sound rolled up in that place. That to me is amazing within itself, that you can take a place and make a speaker out of it.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, it's kind of like colors too, and maybe I don't know, this is B-roll stuff, but when I look at a color, just my mind deconstructs, green into fundamental colors and whatnot. So I when I was in the art program in Southern Utah, an elder gentleman, I was painting with him, and he says, I really think that artists look at the world different. They see the world differently. And I didn't quite understand what he meant. And maybe he didn't mean this, but through time, with design and exploring deeper and deeper into what design could mean and the symbolism behind certain things, I started to get it.